And he joins us, Florida State legend that he is. How are you, sir?
I am fantastic, Adam. Good to catch up with you. I am in New York City, so I'm coming to you from middle of Manhattan. I was up here last night doing some studio work and got out of South Florida with the hurricanes that came down there, so I was lucky to get out. Thankfully, my side of the state, I think, was relatively unscathed from the hurricane. The tornadoes were wild.
Yeah.
But, I'm headed back home today. And it's always good catching up, man. Good to be on.
It's good to have you. Real quick, I don't know how far south you are. Has the Kanell family?
Fantastic. I actually brought my wife and my 12-year-old with me, and I left my teenage daughters, 17 and 15, with my mother-in-law. So, if they would have gotten wiped away, it wouldn't have been the worst, thing in the world. But
all right.
I'm just kidding.
I know.
My teenagers are a pain in the neck, and, mother-in-laws are mother-in-laws. But it was we weren't going to go, and then, it started to show that it was going to head a little bit north of us. And so I was not worried about the hurricane. The tornadoes actually hit about 20 minutes from my house. Ooh. So I would have been in massive trouble, and I would have been a panic if something would have happened with those. So thankfully, we run unscathed, but everybody in the Kanell household is fine.
Good deal. Good to hear.
Yeah.
All right, let's start with something really good. Let's start with the potential for 3 teams from the Atlantic Coast Conference right now to look like college football playoff teams. Clemson, Miami, not necessarily in this order. And SMU, because pretty much of kind of a soft, doesn't mean they're going to win them all, but a soft schedule from here to the finish line. What are your thoughts on that potential? Will it make Greg Sankey and Tony Petitti's head explode?
My dad, I don't think he's listening, because even though he follows my nephew, Ben Middlebrooks, at NC State, I don't know if he has access to your radio show. He would be very upset with you because you left out the Pitt Panthers, who are undefeated. Yeah. So, it's actually, I think Jim Phillips and the ACC should be fired up about the way things are unfolding. Clearly, you would probably prefer to have some of your blue bloods and some of your traditional ACC teams in the mix, but the fact that you've got 4 that are actually in this conversation, and don't forget, UVA, Virginia's 4-1, but clearly they're going to start knocking off each other. But if they could get 3 in, and I thought there was a chance it would be 3. Unfortunately, I thought it was going to be my Seminoles, and they, of course, fall well short of expectations. But if they have 3 in the conversation and that are, on the debate table for that maybe 11th or 12th seed, I think that is the best case scenario that anybody would have said, yeah, sign us up for that for the ACC as a whole.
Danny Kanell joining us here, Cover 3 podcast, also with betonline.net. Well, we're going to get to the NC State situation in a minute, especially in light of what Dave Doran had to say yesterday, which I know you haven't heard it yet, so we're going to play it for you in just a couple of minutes. But just your take from your perspective, Clemson and Miami. Let's just kind of focus in on those 2 teams. Do you think they are for real? I know Miami has really begged to lose the last 2 games, both nationally televised. But do you think that those 2 teams are for real?
Absolutely, I do. And here's why. And I can hear the doubt in your voice, Adam. I can hear you saying, are they really as good as Ohio State or Texas?
Well, they don't have to be as good as Ohio State or Texas.
Exactly. And guess what? We would have said Alabama. Man, they're in a tier all by themselves. And it wasn't that long ago we thought Georgia was unbeatable. Parity is here in college football. That's the one thing I have kind of had this feeling that we were going to see this with the transfer portal. I think it unequivocally is here. And I mentioned Alabama losing to Vanderbilt. We've seen teams that look beatable play down. The top teams aren't going away, right? That's why the usual suspects are at the top, and they're still going to amass probably the most talented rosters, but they're not quite as deep as they used to be. And I think that's the recipe for Alabama gets knocked off by Vanderbilt. And Vanderbilt's a pretty good example.
Yeah.
Vanderbilt did things the, quote, right way for a long time. And then all of a sudden, they're trying to compete against teams that have bagmen and have every sort of booster payment under the table. And they're like, how are we supposed to compete with this? Well, now guess what? They go out and they get a quarterback from New Mexico State named Diego Pavia, and he's good, and he's only one of many guys that they got in the transfer portal. So all of a sudden, they're able to compete. And by the way, Alabama, who usually has 90% of their roster of 4 and 5 stars, and it's still a really loaded roster, all of a sudden that depth gets taken a little bit away because, I mean, shoot, look how many guys from Alabama are playing at Florida State. Maybe they were the wrong guys, and there's a reason they're not playing there. But they did leave. So right. Alabama doesn't have as much depth along the roster either. So the talent is starting to spread out across college football. And so when you ask about Clemson and Miami, I'm like, yeah, why not? They look like some of the best teams in college football. And the Clemson game against Georgia, I think, was closer than we think. I know the final score was sideways and it looked ugly, but they actually held with them in that first half. And Cade Klubnik's been playing with a ton of confidence. I think that's a totally different Clemson team at the end of the year than it was in the beginning. So, yeah, I think Clemson and Miami and SMU and Pitt, I think they can go toe-to-toe with anybody.
Danny Kanell is joining us here on the Adam Gold Show. I agree now because I remember I watched that Clemson-Georgia game, and if Clemson could have mustered anything resembling competent offense, that game could have been different, but ultimately they just wore down. I will get to Heisman stuff in a second, but that really has carried Miami with the way Cam Ward is. I think we talked to Chip Patterson, your colleague from the Cover 3 podcast, every Wednesday. And I always ask him, is this the weekend where Miami gets Cristobaled? So, like the rest of their schedule, I mean, they've got some tough games. I think they've got Pitt on their schedule. That's obviously difficult. They close at Syracuse. That is not going to be a comfortable game because Syracuse is obviously good. NC State's going to find that out tonight. How do they avoid being Cristobaled?
They also have Louisville. I mean, This is the thing about the parity. As good as I feel like Miami can beat anybody, we've also seen they could lose to anybody. And that is where coaching, I do think, becomes a premium. I actually like Mario Cristobal. I think he's a really good recruiter. I think he's a good coach. And yes, I agree. He's made some boneheaded decisions, including that disastrous one not to kneel on it at the end of the Georgia Tech game last year. I think Cam Ward is special. Now, the thing with Cam Ward, he's got a little bit too much of the gunslinger mentality, which almost cost him against Cal. I don't know if you were up late. That game was on really late.
Yes, it was.
He had a play where he was rolling to his right and throws back across his body because he's trying to make a Patrick Mahomes-type play. It ends up being a pick six. Against Virginia Tech, he was a little bit sloppy with the football, but he's also the same guy that had 277 yards passing in the second half and helped bring them back against Cal. He is a dynamic playmaker. I actually think some of these close losses could actually help them dial in. I'm more worried about the schedule. But here's the thing. I think they could get clipped maybe once, but they'll still be in the ACC championship, most likely, if that is the scenario, unless it's, they actually don't play Pitt. I'm looking at their schedule, so they avoid that one. So, that would be the one that they could possibly eliminate them. But I still think they're going to be a team that'll be in there at the end of the season, maybe 11-1. And I would not be surprised, Adam, if you see potentially 2 10-2 teams playing in the ACC championship game. But I also think you could see 9-3 playing in the Big 12 championship game. You could see 11-1, 10-2 in the SEC championship game. It's just this new era of college football is here. The schedules are tougher. The super conferences are here. And I think you're going to see teams start beating each other. The point spreads would allude to that. The quality of play across the board would allude to that. So I think it's something we just need to get used to. Like the days of undefeated in the conference championship games, I think those are behind us.
Quite possibly, especially when Greg Sankey said yesterday to the media, if we could only figure out a way to ramp up our non-conference schedules. Right, like there hasn't been a mechanism forever to play more difficult non-conference schedules. I didn't want to get into that. Everything I heard from Greg Sankey and Tony Petitti yesterday was comedy. It is good that Ohio State is finally playing a team that could beat them because they haven't played one yet, and I don't know, other than Penn State, I can't imagine they're going to lose to a very mediocre Michigan team. To me, Ohio State is going to play Oregon, Penn State, both on the road, by the way, and the Big Ten title game. Those to me are their only 3 losable games. all year. So nobody has figured out how to get Ohio State to play a better schedule.
I will. I agree with you, but there is one but. Remember what happened to Bama against Vanderbilt. It's so hard to envision and call those upsets. And if you said to me right now, like, all right, what game is it going to be? Because Vanderbilt was playing pretty well before that game. Is it Nebraska? No, it's at home. I think it's probably the Indiana game is really interesting. That game, like Indiana, Kirk Cinetti squad is playing really with a lot of confidence, but even saying it, like that would be the recipe for the unbelievable upset because it'll probably be a similar point spread. Like Ohio State should be a 3-touchdown favorite against Indiana, but they've been really hot. But I get like I think they're probably them or Texas, and probably Ohio State has the best roster, like the best amassment,
right.
The best collection of talent in college football. So I totally understand why you say that. But they also, so I kind of like Oregon this weekend because Oregon's been tested. Like they were taking the wire by Boise State, which at the time was like, ew, is Oregon that good? Well, guess what? Boise State is probably going to be a college football playoff team, and they probably have one of the Heisman finalists there playing running back for them. So all of a sudden, that game, which they did win, feels a little bit, doesn't feel as bad. And Oregon's been getting better. They haven't given up a sack in 3 games. I actually think Oregon has a chance in this game. It's a tight point spread. There are so many home underdogs this weekend. Environment is tough, and Ohio State has not been an environment like this year. Specifically, their quarterback, Will Howard, the type of pressure he's going to face if it's tight. I actually kind of lean Oregon in the points here. I hope this game lives up to the billing because I do think there's a chance we could see a rematch of this in the Big Ten title game.
Yeah, and it's not on too late for me. Danny Kanell called me old in the last bit of our conversation. I'm going to spare you the Dave Doran clip, but you got to go listen to it, and then you guys can chat about it on your Cover 3 podcast. You did your locks thing yesterday, right?
I did, yeah.
Yeah. I didn't. I'm playing catch up on life. I will get to the locks edition of the Cover 3 podcast. Real quick. I remember in the opening week when losing to Vanderbilt meant you were trash. Nobody said that about Alabama. It's like, wow, Vanderbilt must be good. It's funny how perception works.
Isn't it, though? Miami has had 2 wins, which were close, and there were some close, some officiating calls that were questionable. And the way teams, the way analysts, specific networks that cover specific conferences, the way they talk about Miami now is, they must be there. There's no way they could be a playoff team.
Right.
And for Alabama, it's like, oh, man, that Vanderbilt, what a story, Diego Pavias. Isn't it funny how that works?
Yep.
I'm trying to get out there, Adam, get the message out there and let everybody know, hey, man, other teams, other conferences play tackle football too. I'm doing my best out here.
I know you are. See, everybody wanted to find the ACC's Paul Feinbaum. It's you. It's you, Danny Kanell. You used to work for ESPN. Now you've gone to bigger and better. But you are still that guy. That's why I like you so much. I'm glad your family's well. I'm glad you took half of it to New York, and I will talk to you again very soon, my man.
You're the best, man. Always great catching up. Have a great weekend. Enjoy the game.
You too. Danny Kanell, thanks to our friends at betonline.net.